There was a stretch a few years back where I did everything you're supposed to do about being tired. I slept, real sleep, full nights of it. I took time off, not a long weekend, an actual stretch with nothing in it. I rested the way the world tells you to rest when you say you're tired. And I came out the other side of all of it just as worn as I went in. Maybe you know this too. Maybe you've done the sleep and the time off, and you're still carrying something underneath that none of it reached. I'm Daniel. Now, before I go one step further, I have to tell you the honest part, and I'm not going to skip it. When rest genuinely wasn't touching it, I went and got looked at. Because tired that sleep doesn't fix is a real thing, and it can be a body thing, and I'm not a doctor, and I'd never pretend to be one. If that's where you are, if you're sleeping and still exhausted and you haven't had it checked, that's a conversation to have with someone who can actually run the tests. I mean that. That part isn't what I can help you with. But here's what happened. I had it checked, and the checkable things came back fine, and I was still worn. And so I went looking for what that underneath thing was, because it didn't match the kind of tired I understood. This wasn't a bad week. It had been there, low and constant, for years, a baseline, not a spell. Once the body reasons were ruled out, I started paying attention to a different kind of worn. The kind rest isn't built to touch, and I think I found some of where it comes from, at least for people my age. I want to tell you what I noticed. The first thing I noticed goes all the way back. A lot of us came home to an empty house. You let yourself in. You made your own something to eat. You did what needed doing in those hours before a grown-up got home, and nobody was coming to check on you, because that was the arrangement, and everyone had one like it. The story people tell about that is that it made us independent. And it did, in a way. But I don't think independence is quite what got built in those quiet afternoons. I remember being maybe 10 and getting a bad cut on my hand doing something I shouldn't have been doing with a kitchen knife nobody was there to tell me to put down. And I remember standing at the sink, running it under the water, and having a very clear, very calm thought for a child that age. I have to handle this. Not I'm scared, not I want my mother. Just, this is mine to deal with, and I'd better figure out how. I wrapped it in a dish towel, and I did figure it out. And I was almost proud of that, for years. I told it as a story about being capable. I don't tell it that way anymore. Because what I hear in it now is a 10-year-old who had already learned, bone deep, that when something went wrong, the person who handled it was him, alone, quietly, and that calling out wasn't part of the plan. What got built wasn't independence, it was a quieter lesson, that needing things was a private matter, that the way you got through was on your own, and that expecting someone to show up for the small stuff would leave you standing there waiting. You learned to not need. You learned it young, before you could have known you were learning anything. But plenty of people had lonely childhoods and aren't carrying this particular kind of worn. So it wasn't just that. That was only the first thing. The second thing came much later, in the middle of life. There's a season, and if you're in it, you know it, where you're holding up the ones above you and the ones below you at the same time. The parents who are getting older and starting to need things, the kids who still need everything, and you, in the middle, quietly holding both ends up, mostly without being asked, because who else was going to? It's a lot of weight that season. But here's the thing I noticed, and it's why the season alone wasn't the answer. The worn outlasted the season. The kids grow. The obligations above you resolve, one way or another, the way they do. The weight actually lifts, and the worn stays, which told me the two-directional years weren't the cause either. They were more like proof of a pattern that was already running. Because a person who wasn't already built to carry both ends alone wouldn't have carried them so silently. The season didn't make us this way. It revealed that we already were. The season didn't make us this way. It revealed that we already were. The third thing isn't a burden. It's a promise. We were told a specific thing, our generation. Put your head down. Sacrifice now. Work hard, don't complain, defer the good part, and it'll come. That was the deal. And a lot of us took it, honestly and completely. We deferred. For decades. I'll give you one of mine because it's easier to see in a specific than in a speech. For years there was a trip I meant to take. Nothing extravagant. A stretch of coast I'd wanted to see since I was young. A few weeks with nothing owed to anyone. And every year there was a reason it wasn't the year. Work needed me. Someone needed me. The money would make more sense next year. I wasn't being noble about it. I genuinely believed the trip was waiting, patient, at the end of all the deferring, and that I'd get there lighter for having earned it. I did finally go. Years later than I'd meant to, and I stood on that coast I'd carried around in my head for 30 years, and I felt almost nothing. Not because it wasn't beautiful. It was. But I'd deferred the wanting for so long that by the time I was allowed to have the thing, the part of me that could have felt it had gone quiet from disuse. I'd trained myself so well in later that I'd forgotten how to be there when later finally came. And here's the clue in that, the part that took me a while to see. It wasn't only that the payoff disappointed, it was the deferring itself. A life spent on later. Later I'll rest, later it'll be worth it, later I'll get to stop bracing, is a particular way to live, and it does something to a person that arriving at the reward doesn't undo. But even that wasn't the whole of it, because there was one more thing, and it's the one that hid all the others. The fourth thing is the joke. We are, a lot of us, very funny about how tired we are. We say, "I'm fine," in a tone that means the opposite, and everyone laughs and moves on. We make the worn into a punchline, the shrug, the whatever. The dark little joke that lets you name the thing without actually handing it to anyone. And I used to think that humor was just our style. Now I think it's the tell. Because a person who makes a joke about being tired instead of saying, "I need help," is a person who learned a long time ago that help wasn't coming. The joke isn't lightness. The joke is the armor a kid built in an empty house, still bolted on at 50. It's how you say the true thing out loud while making sure no one has to do anything about it, because you stopped expecting anyone to before you were old enough to know you'd stopped. So there it was. 4 things. And they all pointed at the same underneath. So here's what I came to, and I'm not going to dress it up as a solution because it isn't one. The worn that rest doesn't reach isn't in the body. That's why the sleep didn't fix it, and the time off didn't fix it. Sleep works on the body. This is somewhere else. It's the worn of a self that has been braced for 40 years. Think about what bracing is. It's holding yourself ready for a weight you've learned is always coming and always yours to carry alone. You did it in the empty house. You did it in the middle years. You did it through all the deferring. And bracing isn't something you do. After long enough, it's something you are. A permanent, low, holding tension you can't feel anymore because you've never once been without it. Sleep lowers a lot of things. It doesn't lower that. You can sleep a full night and wake up still braced because the bracing was never in the muscles rest can unclench. It's in the part of you that decided, before you had any say in it, that you were the one who handles things and no one is coming. That's the tired underneath the tired. And naming it, I have to be honest, does not lift it. I found all this out, and I still wake up carrying it most mornings. Understanding where the bracing came from didn't teach me how to stop. What it did do was smaller. It made me stop being ashamed of it. I stopped believing the worn meant I was failing at something everyone else had figured out. It turned out most of my generation was braced right alongside me, all of us quietly holding a weight we were handed too young to refuse. That wasn't nothing. But I won't tell you it was a cure. It wasn't. I'm still worn. I just stopped adding shame to it. I'll leave you with this. If sleep isn't fixing your tiredness, get the body part checked. That part is real, and it's not mine to answer. But if the checkable things come back fine and something worn is still there underneath, you might not be sick and you might not be failing. You might just be a person who was braced too early for too long and was never once told it was allowed to be set down. Rest was never going to reach that. It was never that kind of tired. Tell me in the comments, do you carry that worn underneath, the kind of good night's sleep never quite touches? I'd like to know. I think a lot of us were braced in the same quiet houses, and if you want to sit with me again, subscribe. I'll be here. I'm Daniel. I'll see you in the late hours.